Good morning. I read a Bible verse over the weekend. I believe it was Proverbs. Reference is escaping me. But the message was loud and clear. It said, "Parents, discipline your children before it's too late, or you will ruin their lives." Scripture is truth in the simplest form, but it's not always easy to hear. It is true. I'm thinking it's wildly true. There's nothing in it that we can't learn from. But it's still really eye-opening sometimes, especially Proverbs, because that's just the epitome of wisdom. Discipline your children before it's too late, or you will ruin their lives. I don't know about you. I don't know how old your kids are, but I can guarantee once they hit the teen years, you're questioning if you did something wrong. It is what it is. I'll share with you first, there is grace for those thoughts. God is gracious, but he also wants you to do things the right way, which is his way. Do things God's way and things go better. Bottom line, no matter where you are in life, things go better when you do things God's way. There are various ways to discipline, and because I'm living in this time, I kind of teeter between the two. With my discipline, sometimes I'm thinking, does this line up with God's ways? Or does this line up with what I've learned in today's world? And am I applying it, but is it really God's way or is it the world's way? So those are things that I have to wrestle through, because I take the scripture to heart that says, don't crush your child's spirit. Don't be too hard on them. But sometimes you feel like it's one correction after another. And there's also scripture that, comforts that as well. It's like, don't be afraid to discipline your children. So I think the theme throughout this scripture that encourages discipline, I believe your discipline has a place. I've always considered discipline to be a form of teaching and punishment to be the consequence aspect of it. So when scripture is telling me to discipline my children, I believe that simply means teach them the right way before it's too late. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, teenagers are much closer to being adults than, say, babies and toddlers. So your teaching kind of has to mold to their age. I mean, you wouldn't treat a teenager like you would treat a toddler, even though sometimes their behaviors might reflect each other a little bit. With that said, there's always the encouragement to discipline. There's never a time that I've read in scripture, maybe it's there, but I don't think it is. There's never been a time in scripture that says, let your kid do whatever they want. You're not going to find it. Because on top of that, the commandments are clear. Honor your parents, obey them, and it will go well for you. So your job as parent, which I use this line all the time. My job as parent is to teach you and love you. Your job as child is to learn and to listen. Listen and learn. So everybody's got a part to play. But ultimately, as a parent, my job is to discipline my children. It's different for every age, but ultimately it needs to be something that you're very clear and concise on, because kids always know when you're wavering. So if you're going through a time right now where something seems out of control, or you're not quite sure how to manage the situation. Figure it out. I'm going back to kind of Ginger Hubbard's methods here. And I'm pretty sure that there are other authors, speakers who will guide you in the same way. Essentially, you want to define what you're teaching to your child. So if you're in a process of trying to work on something specific, generally, I guess I should say generally behaviors of children kind of reflect different things. They reflect their diet, they reflect their the level of chaos in their environment. Kids will respond to what's given to them, that nurture mindset, and then there's nature. So nature would be, how is my child made up? You know, every child has different personalities. Some are more strong-willed than others. Some are more relaxed than others. Some don't really push the limits on things, and some push every limit there is. So your discipline kind of has to work alongside your child. Even in the same home, your methods could be different, but ultimately you still want to have this baseline of what's appropriate and what's not, so to speak. So say, for instance, you're working on something with your child, a certain behavior that you believe that will essentially not serve them well as they get older. So what you'll do is you'll define it, and you'll let them know what the expectation is. And then every single time you have to follow through. So it's helpful to pray about the situation, figure out what exactly am I trying to accomplish in this situation, and then the follow-up is, what is the consequence going to be? What is something that I'm willing to do every single time my child does such and such? Ultimately, your goal is to establish your authority in a nurturing and loving way. So you can have a field day with what I'm saying here, but harsh discipline will not teach as well as patient discipline. And this is kind of where I struggle, because I don't want my patience to be perceived by my children as allowing something to be done that isn't right. So that's something that I've struggled with and prayed about, especially in recent years, because I do tend to have a more permissive is a strong word, but I tend to be big picture based. And, you know, I definitely believe that children should respect authority, but the way we get there has been fuzzy in my mind for a long time. And as my faith has grown, as my desire to do things God's way has grown, it's definitely gotten better. But I do hear, don't discourage your child's spirit. You don't want to break them, but they do need to learn what's acceptable and what's not. So it's a very fine line as far as I'm concerned. And as I continue reading through scripture and I read these verses, the message that is clear is the fact that you have to be proactive. This is not a passive experience. Your kids will not raise themselves, and if they do have to, it will not be beautiful. It will not be pretty. Discipline your children while there is still hope, so you don't ruin their lives. So I know how I interpreted that verse, and I know how it's said, and I know how you might interpret it, and it might be different, but I think that the message is clear. Be proactive about disciplining your children in whatever way that you believe in your heart is the right way. That's how you do it, but just make sure that you're doing it. Have a great day.